Nobody likes paying taxes, but we all end up doing so. Governments need the money to pay for essential public services, and in the wake of the global economic crisis, they're going after every penny they can get. The OECD has been helping governments in a fight against international tax evasion. I'm with Grace Perez-Navarro, who is the Deputy Director of the OECD's Centre for Tax Policy and Administration. Grace, can you tell us what has the OECD been doing in this fight against tax havens and tax evasion?
Yes, Nick, we have been working for several years now in developing standards for increasing transparency and establishing effective exchange of information between countries so that they can tackle effectively cross-border tax evasion. And we have seen over the last 10 months extraordinary progress in the adoption of these standards by major financial centers like Singapore, Hong Kong, various others, and also the implementation of these standards. In the last 10 months, we have seen over 100 agreements signed to provide for exchange of information.
But how can you be sure now that the jurisdictions that have made these commitments live up to their commitments? What can you do to follow the reality of these agreements?
Well, there are several things that we are doing already. The first is we have restructured and expanded the Global Forum on Transparency and Effective Exchange of Information for tax purposes. This is a group we established to help develop the standards that we're now trying to implement, and they are now going to look at in-depth peer reviews of each of the countries to see that they are implementing these standards in the way that is intended so that they can implement exchange of information in an effective manner. Now, this is a process that was just launched, and the peer reviews will begin very shortly. In addition to that, countries are also taking individual measures, whether you call them sanctions, countermeasures, defensive measures. These are all measures designed to help countries defend their tax bases and to dissuade countries from trying to facilitate tax evasion. We just saw recently in the G20 statements, statements about being ready to implement sanctions as from March. And so we should certainly try to avoid those sanctions and encourage implementation of those standards. But if there are countries that are doubting the sincerity of the major economies of the world about the fact that the time for implementation is now, well, countries will be looking to implement sanctions. What kinds of sanctions are we talking about? We're talking about things like disallowing deductions for payments to entities in tax havens, establishing additional reporting requirements for transactions that go through non-cooperative jurisdictions. The regional and international development banks are looking at their policies about investments, loans going through non-cooperative jurisdictions, and there are other measures being considered of that nature. The message is pretty clear that non-cooperation will no longer be tolerated.
So it's the end of bank secrecy and tax havens as we know them.
Well, I think what we're going to see, yes, is the end of bank secrecy for tax purposes. Bank secrecy will continue to remain for the protection of the privacy rights of individuals, but there is a serious law enforcement need for access to bank information to effectively implement tax laws. And so, in that sense, yes, the era of bank secrecy is over.